Hello everyone, this video is on secondary dominants. Now before we start talking about what secondary dominants are, we first need to cover two ideas. The first is the idea of tonicizing something, or making a new note briefly act as the tonic. So it's a note that is not actually the tonic, but we're treating it as if it is. So if we're in D major, and we're tonicizing C, that means that we're briefly acting as though C is the tonic. Now, the second thing we need to cover are the characteristics of a dominant chord. Dominant chords are most inclined to lead to the tonic chord. That is their actual function. Just as a reminder, dominant chords are 5s, 7s, and occasionally fully diminished 2s. So dominant chords, again, they want to lead to the tonic chord. They are major, diminished, a major minor 7, or a fully diminished chord. That is just what a dominant chord is. Those are the characteristics. So now that we've covered those, a secondary dominant is a chord that has a dominant relationship to a chord other than a 1 chord. So it is briefly tonicizing a note that is not the tonic by having a very strong pull to that new note. It's such a strong pull that it can be classified as a dominant relationship. So some examples of what secondary dominants look like are the 5 of 5, the 7 of 6. Now, just to clarify how to say this, it's the first Roman numeral of the next Roman numeral. So it's blank of blank. In this case, 5 of 5. In this case, 7 of 6. Now, the reason I have this one here, even though you will never see it, is just as a clarification. If you're having trouble with the it's something over something, you can think of the fact that all the normal chords that you see are essentially blanks of 1. This part, the lower part of the, it's not a fraction, but the lower part of the expression is the part that is being tonicized. So in this case, 5 is being tonicized. In this case, 6 is being tonicized. Well, in every other dominant chord that isn't classified as a secondary dominant, 1 is being tonicized, even though it's actually the tonic. This is why you don't see this, because it's not necessary. You're in the key of 1, so you don't need to specify that you're treating it like the tonic. Now, as I said before, the lower Roman numeral is being tonicized, and then something I didn't say before is that the upper Roman numeral is the actual relationship the chord has to this chord being tonicized. That's very important to keep in mind in terms of how to write down a secondary dominant given a Roman numeral. So to find the root of a Roman numeral, you need to find the root of the lower chord, or the tonicized chord, and then you need to add the appropriate interval given by the upper Roman numeral. So in the case of 7 of 6, if we're in C major, 6 has a root of A, and then a 7th chord that represents the 7th scale degree, which is a major 7th above the tonic scale degree. So that means that you add a major 7th to the 6th. You add a major 7th to this root of the 6th chord, or in this case to an A, and so that gives you a G sharp. So the root of a 7 of 6 in C major is a G sharp. Now, you next need to determine the quality of the chord, and that is always given by the top Roman numeral. So in our case of 7 of 6, it is given by, the upper Roman numeral, which in this case is a diminished Roman numeral. So this means that while the root is G sharp, it's a diminished quality triad. So it would be G sharp, B, and D. Those are the notes you have to work with. If you had a 5 of 5 we'll stick with C major, that means if you were to write out this chord, you would need to find the root of the 5, which would be G, and then you'd add a 5th because it's a 5. So then you come up with D. That's the root of the chord. It's major, so that means it's D, F sharp, A. In the case of a 5 of 6, again, 6 has a root of A in C major. And then if we add a 5th, that's an E. So its root is E, and it's a major chord, as determined by this 5, so it's an G sharp B, E G sharp B chord. So it's E major chord. Now, despite the fact that the lower Roman numeral is minor, it's still major. It only depends on what the upper Roman numeral's quality is. Alright, now how to figure out the proper Roman numeral given an actual chord. So one of the dead giveaways of a secondary dominant, or some other kind of chord which you're not going to talk about in this course, is an accidental. Secondary dominants are tonicizing something that is different from the actual tonic. So it's bringing us outside of the key that we're actually in. So this means that we're going to, of course, see the results of that, which are accidentals. Accidentals are showing that we're now in a new key area for that brief moment. So if the accidental is raising a note from what it normally is, it's the third of a chord, or it's the leading tone rather, not the third of a chord necessarily. If lowered, it is the new seventh of a chord, or the new fourth scale degree. Now, using this information, we can find the root and what the secondary dominant is leading to. Now, the reason I put third of the chord and seventh of the chord here is because if you're ever harmonizing a melody and you see a raised or lowered something, just do yourself a favor and treat them as like the third of a 5 chord or the seventh of a 5 chord. It's just that easy. But in terms of actually identifying it as if you're doing a Roman numeral analysis, you need to, find out, one, how many different notes there are, and then two, the quality that those notes create in order to figure out what part of the chord it is. But it's still the leading tone and the fourth scale degree. So by using that, we can find out what chord is being tonicized, because the leading tone, if you raise it a half step, well, a minor second, will tell you what the new tonic is. So if we're in C major and we have a G sharp, that means the G sharp is now the new leading tone. If we raise it a minor second, we get to A. That means what we're tonicizing is A, or the 6th chord, since A is the root of the 6th chord. However, if it is lowered, like if we're in C major and we get a B flat instead of a B, that means that it is acting as the 4th scale degree and will go down to the third of the new tonic. So it'll go down by a half step or a minor second to A. So then A is the third of the chord that's being tonicized. So a third below A is F. So then we know it's of 4. Then you just need to figure out the relationship of the roots of the chord being tonicized and the actual chord you're seeing, and the quality of the actual chord you're seeing. And you can put the relationship and the actual quality in the upper Roman numeral. Now, if there are no accidentals, you'll naturally write out the Roman numerals in the normal way. However, hopefully you'll realize that they're a little bit strange. So when you realize that, you need to start thinking about the relationships between the chords. Are they related like a 5 to 1 or like a 7 to 1 are? If the answer is yes, you can use a secondary dominant. So if we have a 1, 3 to 7, 7 to 3, those aren't outside of the key. We don't need to use accidentals to represent them. But you never see a 7, 7. So if we think about, well, how is a 7, 7 related to a 3? It turns out that it has a 5, 1 kind of relationship. So we can rewrite that as a 1, 3, 5, 7 of 3, 3. So this way it's a little bit clearer what's actually happening in the chords, because really there's no functionality in a 7, 7. There is a functionality in a 5, 7 of 3, however. Now, in some circumstances not applicable to the AP test, you can use the same idea of a chord over another chord to make clear relationships between other chords in a progression. So if you have a 1, 6, 7, 5 of 5, 5 to 1, well, a 6, 7 is weird, but it doesn't have a dominant relationship to the next chord. Right away we can tell that because it's not major, it's not diminished, it's not fully diminished, and it's not a major minor 7. It's a minor minor 7. So we're automatically out of the running for it to be a secondary dominant. However, it can be written in a similar way. If we think about what a 5 of 5 is, if we were to write it out in, quote, normal Roman numerals, it would turn out that it's a big 2, because a fifth above the fifth scale degree is the second scale degree. So if we think about circular progressions, that'd be 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. We can then determine that really this 6, 7 is kind of acting more as a 2, 7 to this 5 of 5. So we can put it instead as 1, 2, 7 of 5, 5 of 5, 5, 1. That makes the relationships a whole lot clearer, and it's more accurate. Another example would be a 1, 6, 7, 3 versus a 1, 4 of 3, 5 of 3, 3. Now, the reason to use those other Roman numerals is it makes your relationships between the chords clearer. Because a 6 to a 7 is a weird chord change, and then a 7 to a 3 makes a bit more sense because it's a circular thing. But again, you can simplify that as a 5 of 3 to 3 because they have a dominant relationship. But then what do you do with the 6? Well, it turns out it has a predominant relationship with the 7, so you can do 4 of 3, 5 of 3, 3. Now, if you find yourself putting everything over something, you will most likely switch keys, however. If you, for instance, in C major, see 2 of 5, 5 of 5, 6 of 5, 5 of 5 to 5, it's probably that you're in G and you're just seeing 2, 5, 6, 5, 1. It's just a whole lot simpler. It's kind of the idea of Occam's razor. The simplest thing is the most correct thing in this case, the most elegant thing. So that's secondary dominance. Thank you. Good night.